DPRS Media Co. We don't just create content, we elevate community through storytelling. Now, we're proud to introduce the newest addition to the family. Welcome to Youth Sports Mastery, the podcast where champions are shaped, not just on the field, but in life. Hosted by the doorman himself, Craig LeBlanc, and National Academy of Athletics founder Aaron Locks. Youth Sports Mastery dives deep into how youth sports can empower kids, strengthen communities, and build leaders. From coaching culture to recreation strategy, and from player development to parent impact, every episode brings game-ready insight from the people making it happen. Youth Sports Mastery goes live every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Only on the Daily Parks and Rec Show, sponsored by National Academy of Athletics and powered by DPRS Media Co. This is where purpose meets play.
Okay, we are live again with our inaugural voyage of Youth Sports Mastery with my co-host Aaron Locks and our first ever guest, Zoya. How are y'all doing today?
Doing amazing.
Fantastic. Well, okay, so today's show, there's so many things we can talk about in Parks and Recreation, but many times our exposure to it was when we were a little kid and we found ourselves on some team and we were awkward and didn't know how to swing a bat. And this is where we got a lot of this generational wisdom that coaches hand down to these little kids coming through. This is where a lot of us meet Parks and Rec when we're, in third grade, fourth grade. And so because it's such a big and important part of Parks and Recreation, we figured we just have to give it its own show. So we're doing this show every Thursday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 52 shows a year to do nothing but talk about the world of youth sports in Parks and Recreation. And Aaron has dedicated almost the majority of his life to this. And we're here to learn more about, what part Zoya plays in this. So welcome to the show, guys. Zoya, why don't you start off by telling, because we're going to have Aaron here for another 52 shows, but tell us a little bit about yourself and the world of youth sports and what role you play in it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you for the opportunity to share. So I do not come from it. I am observing and living in it as a first-person parent, as a narrative in the space. So I'll be kind of speaking on it from that standpoint. Personally, I did not grow up playing sports. I always like to kind of include that as part of the background, simply because I immigrated here from the Ukraine when I was 9. I lived in New York City, in the inner city of Brooklyn, area. And so that was not a part of my experience growing up. And then I immediately observed that being somewhat, and certainly now the norm when we moved to suburbia when I was in high school. So I've got a few gap years there where my experience differs a little bit, but now certainly as a parent, it's quite different. And so we'll talk a little bit more about as to what that all is. Professionally, I spent 20 years in financial services and banking. So my, background is not in sports, but it is in technology. And so that is the lens through which I'm coming back into the space, both as a parent, as a technologist as well, to try and solve a gap that I experienced as a parent within my own home that I believe and we hope is going to be of benefit and use for other families like our own. So.
And so, Aaron, you actually had a couple of questions that you had prepared for her. What's our first one out of the gates we're going to throw at her?
Well, first of all, I thought the idea of, the fact of, we talked to so many Parks and Rec professionals, but I want to also flip the script a little bit and let them hear what it's like to be a parent, maybe a parent that maybe has 3 daughters that play multiple sports, that have a lot going on. What do you think?
Do we know anyone like that?
I wouldn't know anyone like that. So maybe the next guest will share a bit more.
So what I thought, just a great way to start, and you kind of dove in a little bit, everybody's got, and Craig, you've said this, and we've talked a lot about this, everybody's got a different Parks and Rec story, unless you have lived a life where you didn't have Parks and Rec. And Zoya, you're a perfect example. You didn't have that recreational experience, which I thought was why I thought it'd be so great to have you, not only what you do professionally, but also, oh, by the way, your mom, right? Your mom, and you've got, so would you just give a little bit about your family, what you're wanting to share, your husband, obviously athletically, and then your kids, and just kind of give paint a little picture for us?
Absolutely. And it's oftentimes the voice that's least heard, being the parent. And I'm certainly feeling that way coming in as a newcomer into sports tech at large, Parks and Recs, of course, and club and travel and just all of the wonderful programming that's out there. But oftentimes we hear most from the coaches and the leagues and the operators and even the athletes themselves. But the parent, as we operate within this space, has needs, has systems that can also benefit them. And so that's kind of the motive that I have. And so myself being a parent of three daughters, yes, you're absolutely right. Their ages are 14, 10, and 7. And I can almost feel my 14-year-old's eyes rolling in the back of my head of how cringe this whole thing is for her. I'm sure she sees me on, doing all these videos. I get lots of feedback from her. But no, we do all of the sports. They're year-round swimmers. All 3 of them are club soccer, club, lacrosse, we run track, a little bit of field hockey, a little bit of dance and acro. So we keep it well-rounded. We're doing all the things that we're told to do, which is to be a multi-sport, year-round athlete. Yeah. And with that comes a lot of scheduling, a lot of logistics, and that's the very angle through which we're solutioning with Orga, which again, we'll speak on a little bit more. But we've had experiences that spanned and initiated within the recreational kind of level when they were quite young. Craig, you mentioned 3rd and 4th grade. Man, the way that everything is moving today, they started when they were 5 years old, and now they're evolving, being pulled into more of the travel stuff at even 7 years old. Yeah. So it's moving way downstream, starting way younger, as we all know the trends and the metrics around all of that. So our experience certainly spans the gamut between rec and now also being on the travel and club.
Mm.
It's interesting, Craig, as we talk about this from the Parks and Rec component, but let's just deal in that space. If your kids started, how nice would it be in your neighborhood if you had a recreation district down the street or a city where your kids could go participate and play locally, where you didn't have to pack up and your husband's driving to one area and you're probably going to another state, let alone another city, to be able to play, right? So when you talk about that, because you haven't grown up with the rec space, what do you think it would be like, just in terms of your mindset of just you be able to have something more local? Do you see the value of that? And part of it is I'm really talking to the rec people out there that they're creating this in their communities. And obviously it's going to be different maybe in California or Texas as it is in New York or New Jersey in terms of the space available. But the importance of that, do you see the value of that? And where's your mindset around that?
Tremendously so. And I see that even with my own kids, again, they love playing with their friends. That is all that they care about at such a young age, right? They don't care about the competitiveness of the team or their stats or, which league or championship they're going to at a young age, as most of my kids still are. They care about being with their friends. And when they're not, they miss out on it. So there's been a few instances where we straddle both the local and the travel teams. And I see how they get pulled in and wanting their friends to come and cheer them on. They really kind of rise to the occasion where they have familiar faces in the stands or in the audience or wherever. And I think that there's such meaningful connections that get formed there. And for us parents too, like when we stand on the sidelines with one another and we're neighbors and we're parents that are kind of, living and operating within a specific community, those are strengthening moments. And for many of us professionally and personally, especially for me now being a founder, that's the only time that I see them. Those are my only social ties, is when we are in the sidelines. So when we are not in those localized kind of communities and we are traveling many, many hours out of state, sometimes, by plane, et cetera, we're not taking advantage of those human moments and connections that can, and should be developed on a much more local level. So I feel that, I see that, I observe it. We've seen both flavors of it. And I see how my kids really kind of, I don't know, they perform different when their names are being screamed in the audience and their friends are cheering for them, right? It feels different.
Maybe talk to parents that aren't so active in youth sports as to what kind of lessons were you looking, why are you involving your children in youth sports? What do you assume that will be taught to them, kind of, because a lot of times we think about early childhood development, we think about education, and as parents, we want the best for our children. So why are you involving your children so much into youth sports, and what are you seeing them get out of it?
I love that question, Craig, so much, because again, there is a personal why that's tied here that I'll come full circle with. Back to my earlier point about not growing up with it. And when I moved to suburbia in high school, it was freshman year, immediately did I observe a difference. Not only was I kind of a rough and tumble, like inner city kid, but also seeing the soft skills that my peers natively, naturally, inherently held. They grew up through sport. They were playing Little League and soccer, and they were on the same team, with one another. And the way they moved and took up space was memorable to me. And I remember citing that as a gap, and it stayed with me. And I was like, you guys do that thing and you say this other thing and you move through, space differently. And I just kind of remember being like, those are soft skills that I'm gonna have to level up to. But also I'll want to make sure that when my time comes as a parent, even like back then as a 16-year-old having that aha moment, that stayed with me. And so now I do feel that there's this, coming back to it and being like, that's the feeling that I wanted to have when my 3 daughters show up and when they perform and when they speak and they maintain eye contact, they're able to, have relationships with adults, that they conduct themselves respectfully, and they just kind of are prepared for life in a way that I think I took a little bit longer to get to, is really important for me to see that in them. Those are the intangibles. And now, of course, we have so much science and research that backs the why. But back then, without such a context and without so much literature, I just remember personally feeling as a kid that like there's a difference there. And now we know why that is, right? Soft skills, physical, conflict resolution, confidence, all of the things that we know and love, and why we make the investments that we do.
Resiliency, right? They learn to get themselves back up, for God's sake, right? And they're not always going to be successful the first time. I know when you and I talked a little bit ago, we just talked about how important it is, especially with girls. You're talking about sports and that. And Craig, we have a guest that's going to come up in a couple of weeks that is really in women's sport that's going to be talking specifically to this. So I think this is great. When we talked a little bit about the whole concept of juggling 3, right? And for me, I'm a rec guy through and through. I started, at the very level of just playing down the street with friends and that. And your kids, because it may not be as safe for them to just go down the street and play, you've got to engage them in programs. But, you talked about something that I really want to make sure everybody hears. And how do you balance? Because let's be honest, there's a lot of pressure on the parent to keep their child engaged in, right? And to level up, to play
and
up.
Progressing through, right? Not just stay and progress through.
Yeah, and once you're in, man, they got you, and it's like the only way you're gonna do it, and that, right? And it's immense, right? So I see it. My kids are older, so I've been through it. I'm okay. Craig, by the way, you guys have something in common because you have a few daughters as well. So there's you. Absolutely. Yeah. But so can you speak a little bit to Zoya? Maybe Craig, you want to jump in as well, but just, man, how about that pressure that you deal with? Because it would be nice to just play with their friends down the street and they may make it better. But the reality is that there's pressure that you've got and you're navigating through that. So can you speak to that a little bit?
There's immense pressure. We know that. And Craig, I'm sure you'll be able to speak to it from, through your lens, much more so than my own. But personally speaking, again, coming into it brand new, we were taking the lead on our oldest. We were like, wherever she wants to do, wherever she wants to go, what else is going on here? And then slowly but surely, the second and the third will break you. But as we were learning through the others, we're like, wow, this is increasing. Programming is becoming available in a way that, yes, there's pressure to sign up and to show up and to try out and do all those things. So we try to strike a balance in the fact that they are multi-sport year-round and multi-sport per season. There are limitations there. So we get to decide every day, every night, what not to do. Like, where are we not going? What are we declining? And it's tough because you feel like you're like, wow, I made this investment. I really want to show up both from like a team perspective and just teach that, like, when we make a commitment, we follow through. But logistically speaking, it's just not possible because we all know when the schedules come out, it's already locked in. We never know what's stepping on what, and we're just trying to make the best of it all. And so that's what we're contending with, is conflicts, deciding what not to do and where to go. And then that becomes a limiting factor when they say yes to things. And thankfully they are open to new experiences, like Flag. They tried out Flag. They loved it. We thought that it would be great for them as well. And I'm like, we just physically cannot take on another thing. So then there is a limit to which we have to say no. But even up until reaching that point, we've said yes a lot to feel that max. So it's the norm. I hate to say, and we work really hard to facilitate these, opportunities for them that I personally did not have. And so that's all part of like the why, and making sure that we're making ourselves available. And that's the plight of the modern parent today. All of those things are true, but the tremendous pressure to like try out, come out, keep progressing, travel even further. We're definitely in the midst of it, but we do say no when it's appropriate. And we certainly have limits that we bump up against quite often.
Yeah.
Craig,
Yeah,
you want to say how many kids you have?
Oh, God. Well,
it'll make her exhale. Watch this. Watch. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I do have 9 daughters and 2 boys. And we always had another 3 or 4 that I guess we just
They're just in the mix.
Right.
I love
Rarely
that.
did I only have 11. It was usually I had, neighbors and stuff with us. But
Wow.
to Zoya's point, there's always, I would just say, quality over quantity, that you don't have unlimited hours. I haven't figured out a way to get more than 24 hours in a day. And oftentimes we are trying to cram so much into their schedule and still have them be a child. Sometimes we don't want to rob their childhood from them. But I would say that there is play, there's socializing, and there's hanging out. And I guess those are important as well. But there's something about sports that adds that layer of adversity, of winning and losing, of team effort, of dealing with the worst player on the team, of dealing with the best player on the team, that adds more of a dynamic that if you're trying to raise a child and prepare them for the future, that youth sports can provide a lot of those dynamics that you just can't get out of socializing or hanging out. And so having sports and teams and games and practices, I mean, that is a great classroom to raise a child and to have a child face physical pain, loss, victory. You just can't get that out of going hang out at the movies. And so we always looked for an excuse to throw our kids into any kind of sports. We wore out cross country because, you just face your greatest fear, dying on the course every practice, it seems. Yeah. But I love that. I loved using youth sports as a way to just form the child and give the child those opportunities that you really can't get anywhere else.
Can I throw a stat your guys' way, which is kind of interesting? I remember
Sure.
I was working on some stuff coming out of the pandemic, right? Because I do this every day. And they said that a child who went through the pandemic, school age, it would take about 3 years to academically catch up. Which makes sense, right? They got it. We did it at home. We did the best we could. My kids were there, right? We did that. But the scariest part to me is that it would take potentially up to 8 years to catch up socially and emotionally.
Yes.
Right. And we're seeing that. But here's the craziest part, going back to your point, is that those that are playing on a team sport where there's individual accountability, opportunity to thrive, to fail, to get back up, to go through all those experiences, that 8 years goes right back down to 3 years.
Well, they're forced back into it, right? They're forced back into that team dynamic, that socialization, whereas before they may have been a little bit slower to warm back up to like, how do we do this again?
Yeah. I was at an event and I was talking with, believe it or not, Tom Selleck, not to name drop, but we were having a chat and he said the one thing that's missing in kids' lives more than anything is parents literally pushing them to allow them the opportunity to fail and allow them that experience, because only through failure do you ever have a chance through individual accountability and opportunity to come out of it. Because if they never experience that, that's sad and scary to me, because that's the one that get out there on their own and you go, now what? Right. And we don't want a bunch of kids out there. Yeah.
My kids, actually, the balance that we try to strike, if there's ever a balance to be struck, not necessarily timing wise, but one that we do try to control is around team-based versus individualized sports. And maybe, Craig, that's what you're alluding to with track and cross country. Like between swimming, we balance that out then with, yes, individual, but then also the other team sports being lacrosse and soccer for us. You against the wall, you against yourself in the pool for as many as even my 7-year-old is putting in right now is immense grit. That perseverance when you know you didn't make a time, when you know that you were dead last in that particular heat, but you still made the cut to something else while visually you lost. That is a lesson that they're learning so early on. And that's why I think that there's tremendous value in it. And I credit, coming into this swim world, through my husband who's a lifelong swimmer. It's incredible to watch them come out of the water or even get into it in these huge meets. I mean, hundreds of kids, you know that, parents, everybody's screaming, it's so loud, and their tiny little bodies are standing up on that block. They're one of 7 with all eyes on them, and they perform. And their outcomes, their performance is all for them, for everybody to see. Their meet mobile, their times are posted, their competition is watching their times from other teams. I mean, that's a pedestal right there to be on and prepare for life skills ahead.
Yeah. I love that message, especially where, you know, you're always losing against your PR. If you set a personal record, you lose to it every day practically. And it's such an event and exciting when you can set a new personal record. And so I always like to encourage kids to get, and parents to put kids in sports where they're going up against a clock, a distance thrown, or a time, because it really is a personal inner battle they face every single time. And remember, there's infinitely more losers than winners. There's only one winner. Everyone else is a loser. And so if you can't have that environment of the child, you know, pushing and struggling against constant failure and loss, then, you know, you're not preparing them for life. It's very brief moments that we have that victory point in our life. The rest of the time, we're just in this improvement. Right. But at the same time, maybe you can speak a little bit about the team sports dynamic, and how that's different when the winning and losing it's like we're all winning and we're all losing on a team sport, and how that's different.
My oldest, she loves the team aspect. She performs individually and appreciates the reasons as to why she should and does, but she loves and craves the team win and even the team camaraderie around the loss, because it's the, you know, one for all for one mentality, also super valuable. That's why we try to strike that balance, because there is strength in numbers. There's strength in that pride, that herd mentality, right? And there's a time and a place where we all seek that community, that belongingness. And so they love that so much. And what we also try to instill and have them observe of us as parents by observation is that we're cheering on their teammates, and we are making sure that it's not their name only that we are screaming, that they see the support of what it means to also be on the other side of the line, on the sidelines, cheering for the team as a collective. And if there is a win, or if there is a score or goal or whatever that's being made by their peers, that's important for them to see us celebrate as well. So the conversations that we're bringing back home are those that are personal to them and their performance and their wins and losses. But the recognition publicly and privately of others is something that's really, really important for us to demonstrate to them.
You know, there's a follow-up to that that's kind of interesting, because I think parents get a bad rap because there's some parents that, let's be honest, they don't do this necessarily the right way, right? You know, some add an immense amount, which again, we could do a whole show on that for weeks, right? But you know, I had a great mentor in Coach Wooden, who talked about focusing on a couple of things. One is that the true competition, like you said, Craig, is the ability to be better versions of ourselves tomorrow than we are today, right? And to continue, so compete within yourself. The other part, though, as parents, and if you're a parent out there, listen to this one, right? Is that if you can focus on the effort rather than just the result, because sustainable success, joy, love, happiness, life through is not just I got lucky and won the race, right? It's all of those pieces that come together. And if the kids can learn to love the work, to love the effort, to love the journey, then they love the sport. Then they're like me, out playing hoops at 52 years old until my body said stop, right? And that's really what we want. We get so focused, I think, as parents on, did they win that game? Did they do it right? Not realizing that the best baseball players in the world are going to get it 7 out of 10 times. You know what I mean? So why is your child going to be better than the best baseball players in the world, right? But in our mindset, we've got this thing in our mind that they have to be and they must be, which goes back to what I said earlier about failure, right? About how do we engage that? You know, in the rec space, I believe they've done an amazing job with Parks and Rec of allowing it to be fun for all is the deal. Their number one goal is always safety. And number two is they had so much fun and learned enough, they want to come back and play it again. Zoya, I want to ask you, what do you, as a mom of 3 that you can see, what could a recreation department do to make it even more enticing for you to feel so comfortable that your kids were going to go out there and play rec rather than getting in that tornado, the funnel of, you just said you're getting on flights to go compete, right? That to me is insane for youth sports. You right? You hear the ones in Texas, these 6-year-old elite club travel soccer. What are you elite at 6 years old at, right? Come on, right? But so back to my question. Sorry, I went on a rampage. I do that every now and then. Talk about in your space, what could the rec departments, we got rec professionals, going to see some parents, what could they do to kind of help make it better, more enticing for you to be able to step in and say, you know what? Yes, let's keep it local. Let's keep it rec.
Yeah, I love that. What would be fun for, I think, my kids, if I just kind of put their hat on, is to do perhaps both. And I don't think that they're mutually exclusive per se, but I know that as a parent, I would carve out space in our schedule to do both if, in fact, they, as kids, felt compelled that there was something in it for them that would, watch me have, observe joy in them, or build those connected tissues even deeper into the community. Perhaps as an idea to come back into, and I know that many towns do this already and have been for many years, to come back into the local businesses and forge even closer ties to the way that, our uniforms used to be sponsored by the local pizza shop, where the local pizza shop would be delivering pizzas as an after, game party, and they all take turns, or we're all going to go get a treat at the ice cream parlor or whatever it is. Kids are simple. They really don't need much. And for us as parents to know that those delights or incentives are being pulled back into the community in that way, those are simple things. It does, of course, require coordination and organization and all of those good things, but with a little bit of effort, I do think that it doesn't take much for us to rally on a Friday night, or even, pockets of time on a Sunday to be like, hey, let's go grab that pizza that we're going to do anyway, but do so with the team, etc. Second piece to that, I think would be really powerful. My kids would rise to this occasion, I'm sure, is peer-to-peer mentorship, but maybe going a couple of grades down. We do this in Girl Scouts frequently, where multiple troops overlap in a way that they're siblings in both. And so the older troop will start to do projects or some activities with the younger, and the siblings love to see each other, like at a distance, but the fact that they know each other's friends, and it's kind of like this like strength and, I don't know, camaraderie there to be like, oh, I know that that's so-and-so's sister, and that's so cool that she's coming to help me, shoot some balls this weekend, or she's going to come to that practice. Even 2-3 years older is everything. They feel so tight. And then they come back into the school district, whether it's that day, that week, or a couple of years from now, they feel those familiar faces. They feel like they belong. They feel like they are familiar ground, that someone's looking out for them. And again, not a whole lot of effort, maybe just a couple of times throughout the year where those connected faces are being shown up in those moments. I know that that's super meaningful for my kids.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, Zoe. You were reading my mind earlier, because I was going to ask you to speak on, since you have different age levels of girls participating, that it's not just about the individual getting better, maybe in their athletic performance, learning to conquer all those demons within that come up when you're in a team sport, but then talk about maybe the opportunities to mentor and to coach, that, you're going to go from being a freshman maybe in a sport, and you've got maybe a senior that's maybe a state champion or something, that you're kind of underneath them and they're showing you the ropes. But then there's a transition to where your daughters might become the varsity person, the senior, and they've got all these freshmen that are coming in underneath them. So what are the lessons that you see your daughter learning through this kind of mentorship program that naturally happens on team sports?
For sure, but it depends on which kinds of teams, because most teams up until you get into high school are segmented by age and birth year, as we know, right? So they're very myopic in terms of like who you're interacting with. You could be 8 months older than the next, but I wouldn't call that to be a mentor per se. Come back to swimming real quick, and I believe that track is probably somewhat similar. There is an opportunity to mix ages from 7 or 6 to 18. In many meets, they are together. Many meets, of course, that they are separated by ages as well, but some of the bigger ones, the kids are together. And so I know for a fact that my younger daughters are always looking up to the oldest seniors, always, up until 18 years old, and they know them by name. They know them not only, throughout town. Some of them babysit for us. Some of the ones they just kind of come around and see a familiar face. So certain pockets and certain sports permit that more so than others. But in the example, let's say, of, my eldest who's getting into high school next year, she doesn't have as much anxiety because she already knows that those freshmen, those sophomores, juniors, et cetera, they're waiting for her on the other side, and she'll have those familiar faces in the hallway because she's kind of straddling, multiple age groups. So the power of that and the confidence that that carries, even aside from sport, right? This is just all about their socialization, how they're kind of coming up through this age, which is really tough for the very reasons that it is for, girls especially, et cetera. It's so important. So I love to see it, and I feel so good knowing that they're blessed to have these, these familiar faces to find in the hallway.
Yeah, love it. Oh, go ahead, Aaron. Do you had another question?
Yeah, I've got one. So my daughter played. She played everything, right? From softball, she did cheerleading, she did soccer, she did everything, which is great. You mentioned something earlier, and I really don't want to lose this thread because I'm feeling like parents are feeling the pressure for their kids to specialize at such a young age. And everybody I've talked to, Craig, we talked about it last week. Everybody I've talked to said, no, that's not the way to do it. You know what I mean? Right. So how have you found, you get it, obviously, because we're talking about it, but how have you been able to find that balance between, because it used to be when I was a kid, you played football for 3 months and then you put the stuff away and then you went to the next and you went to the next, you went to the next, right? And you've heard the story of Wayne Gretzky, right? Where when his season was over, his dad took the box out and they put the skates and they put everything away in the box and it went away and they brought out the baseball equipment. And then that was there for 3 months and then they put that away and it was literally seasonal. And now there's no seasonal, it's just chaos, right?
Year round. Stack.
Part of it's because it's become big business, which right, that's part of the deal. But the other part of it is that they're all climbing because they want your daughter. We need your daughter because we need this. So how are you able to balance between playing multiple sports?
Yeah.
Right? And how are you juggling that? Besides the fact you've got 3, or Craig, you've got a whole football team, how do you navigate through that in your mindset of what they're going to play? How do you go through that?
We stand our ground pretty firm on that, but I know that we're, I can't say the exception to the rule because I do feel that pressure for sure. That pressure is coming from the teams that want you to move forward with them, the ones that are positioning themselves as elite, the ones that really want you to show up at every single practice. And we totally understand as to why that is, and we respect that fully, but respectfully, we draw the line to say, no, we're going to continue to do those other things for the reasons that we will. With that, however, requires a ton of communication. We are very communicative with the coaches. We must be respectful to them as to why they want to lead the way that they lead. They want to, assemble a team and have a formation of all these different things as to why they would, but respectfully giving them enough of an advance notice and being very written form through email, et cetera, to say, we are proactively declining this event. We will not be here. We have this conflict, so-and-so. And we also are asking for our daughters to show up, especially the older two, to deliver that message personally to the coaches. And they themselves become their own voice box to say, I have this conflict. I will be at this game. I will be at this meet, or I will be away for the following reason. So they have to be accountable to their presence as well as their absence. And so that's the way that we kind of balance it that way. But I will also say, especially the eldest, is seeing what it's like for her peers to specialize, and arguably the types of results that they are seeing as a result of that specialization. They are going to nationals. They are breaking records. They are coming up on record boards where, she's kind of observing that going, well, they don't play lacrosse. They don't play soccer. They're just in the pool. Again, respectfully, that is a choice year round. And there's a lot of performance, indicators as to why that is. For them, I think she's just going to be like, well, I don't get those results, but I'm also enjoying myself in those other ways. And I don't want to change that necessarily. So that is the balancing act and some of those tough conversations that we have at home.
And your kids get to be kids, which is a big part of it, right?
Part of it.
The next piece of that, though, is once you start to get to be in high school, then that 5-sport, 3-sport, 2-sport, 1-sport makes sense, right? But as you're still trying to figure it out, I hear these people talking about, your daughter's already tall, so she could be a basketball player. And he's like, we don't know if she likes basketball or not, So they've got to figure themselves out, right? Can I ask a follow-up to that? So with that being said, and I love the fact you've got different ages, and Craig, you probably should chime in as well going forward, because for me, it was always about love of the game, right? I have a red, a yellow, and a green chart that I use for my kids, which basically, if they didn't want to practice, that was a yellow flag for me. It's like, oh, they're not really loving this, right? Mm-hmm. If they didn't want to play a game or go compete, that was a red flag.
Yeah.
Green one was if they're asking me to go play catch with them or go do it, right? So I have this measurable piece. And as you go through these journeys, and like we talked about the other day, once you commit, I've got a very good friend. Her son is playing high school football, and it's spring football, and they're up early in the morning and working out, and he's getting up like, I don't want to do this. And she's like, well, you made a commitment, so we're gonna complete this commitment, and then if you don't want to do this, that's fine. We're gonna come up with a plan B.
And follow through.
But like you said, to follow through. So for both of you, Zoya, ladies first, how do you keep the love of the game? Because if it becomes, I said this and I just did this, if it becomes a job rather than a joy, we do take it away from them. And we're seeing nationally kids quit playing at such a young age because it's a job, right? So how do you balance that? And both of you actually, but how do you balance that and keep the love of the game in there for them?
Craig, I'll kick it over to you in just a second. Aaron, I completely agree with your green. Green is green for us as well. We look for those similar signs. Yellow and red, same. Yellow, I'll kind of double click on real quick, because I'll want to understand the why behind the yellow, and it differs for not only each child but also the age. We fall into very much the metric of 13 years old, dropout rate for girls, 85%. All of that we lived it, especially this time last year. We had some tough conversations. There was a no that I kept hearing from her, specific to one of the sports that she's invested in, most of her life. And I needed to understand the why. What was interesting about the why is we had a very objective kind of grown conversation around it. It actually was multifaceted. There were many reasons behind her why. And I worked hard to peel back the layers as opposed to kind of taking it for face value. And I tried to understand that there was anxieties and fears and concerns about the growing, requirements around scheduling. And she wasn't sure if she was going to balance her workload. And we made a contract basically with her to say, if you feel overwhelmed, academics comes first. If there's a big test, you don't get to go to practice the night before. If you feel like you have to study, so on and so forth. All of those things were talked through. And then we came out with the yes on the other side of it. And she's grateful for that. She's come around multiple times, full circle, to say, look, I'm so grateful that you don't let me just quit face value. We had that tough discussion. It took a few days to kind of work through with a sober mindset and all the ways that we've kind of worked through it. But it was an interesting moment that I'm like, I can either go this way, or we can kind of at least try to understand if there's a different way. So for that one, it worked. We'll see how the others are going to work through a similar phase, but that is an experience from last year.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to double down on that one, understanding the why you're doing what you're doing is important for the kids to understand and to explain it to them. When I think about the number of kids I put through sports, there was half of them that were never going to like sports. They hated it from day one. They never liked to practice, but you put them on a cello or piano or art, and they will wipe the floor with you. And I'm still drawing stick figures over here, and they're painting masterpieces. But when you put them on the practice field, they want to leave on the way there. And so we had to explain that, much like we would encourage our kids that weren't as musically inclined or in the arts, that no, you need to develop this part. It's not about being the best. It's about being the best version of yourself. And to just not give yourself the opportunity to expose yourself to music or to art. It's the same as not exposing yourself to, what can your body do when you push it? And what does that look like? And we know you're never going to be the athlete of the family, just like we know that one's never going to be the artist of the family. But it's important for you to push and discover all parts of your body. And that's what we're here for. We're not here for you to be all of a sudden the athlete of the family. We're here for you to just learn and understand that part of yourself so that you don't have these neglected components of your body. And so, believe me, we had kids that were never going to be the athlete and still aren't today. But in other areas, they're like the family. And I think that goes in sports too. Some kids are better at some sports than others. it's important to just have a good diversity among, what obstacles you're putting in front of your children.
I would also say, Aaron, just real quick, back to the yellow light, because I love that visualization. The yellow why, it also would come back to me to be like, is it because it's starting to feel hard? Is that why it's a yellow? Because that's another life lesson. Because if we're going to now all of a sudden dial it back because, it's starting to feel hard, or you need to put some, more work in it, or it's a different type of work ethic, or fueling your body, learning about all these different complexities that you've never had to, really learn about. That is another conversation. That is another double click, is to understand why. That's another pivot on the parental journeys to say, oh, now we are all doing more. We're now talking about these things differently. That was a part of it as well for us, right? It's like, it starts to feel hard. Your body is changing. It's bigger, it's heavier, it's doing things that you can't control it doing. And, there's works around that, but that was another point that came to mind. Like, if it feels hard, maybe that's not reasonable.
But I love the why. We're all saying the same thing. The why. Some parents, if you're out there, before even thinking of signing your child up for the sport, find their why. I have a parent quiz. I do a lot of parent training, parent seminars, and I actually have a parent quiz. And the parents take the quiz and ask themselves questions, and then they don't show it to their child, but they ask the child the same questions.
Yeah.
How important is what position you play? How important, these different factors and why. And it was funny because I remember my daughter, who, when she was starting out, why she wanted to play softball, right? And when we found out her why, and her mom was a really good softball player, her brother played baseball, the whole deal. So it's like, yeah, that's the why. But no, it wasn't. You know what she wanted? She wanted a matching uniform. She wanted the socks that matched the thing. The whole deal.
Listen, it's all about the gear. You ask any woman, it's all about the gear.
The gear, yeah. So, but once we found out her why, and we could do that, but the other one, and you said it right from the beginning, Zoya, which is so just in tune, which is the friendship. And it's funny to me because a lot of times my kids, what I found, and kids I deal with, that they're leaving the sport because their friends left, or their friendships aren't being able to be developed. And again, because if the focus is too much from the team on the win, on the victory, rather than the journey and the relationships, because that's really what it's about. I'm still friends with kids from when I was a kid. You know what I mean? We still, my baseball coach from when I was 7 years old, he just had his 85th birthday. And you know what? I just talk to him all the time. That isn't that great? So I want to lean into the coaching, because I know we're gonna dial in. But so Zoya, you have had your kids play and had a lot of different coaches.
Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about the coach? Because what are you looking for as a parent, right? Craig, what are you looking for as a parent from the coaching side? Because one of the biggest things right now in recreation that there are challenges is getting enough parent volunteers, getting enough coaches to come out and coach, right? And then the training and all the factors that go along with it. So let's talk a little bit about coaching. I want to get off the parent for a second. Let's dive into although a lot of coaches are parents, right? But so give me a few things, both of you. I'd love to hear. Just give me a few things, if you would, about what are you looking for a coach? What do you want? And what are some of the experience or the best coaches you've had, and why? Because I think that would be a really good place to go.
Craig, why don't you start this time?
There you go.
So, and this was a question I actually wanted to ask to both of you, and I think it goes in with Aaron's question. But I don't know about y'all, but I did not graduate from the School of Parenting before I was given kids. And so it's really on the job training. And I think it's as important to look at yourself as, okay, who am I as a parent? How do I want to parent? I've been given this child, and that didn't come in with an instruction manual. And so getting yourself out among other parents, especially older parents that might be on their second or third child, and trying to get some feedback, that's important too. And I think that feeds right into your coaching question. I think it's important as to your role as a parent to coach, not just to coach your own child, but to coach other children, to see all the different ways that a child can be on our team. And if you're not honing your personal skill of being a parent, and I think a great practice for being a parent is coaching. When you coach other teams, especially if you have not had the pleasure of being assigned 15 8-year-olds or 5-year-olds, you have not lived. And talk about test you as an adult, as a parent to herd cats, all with different jerseys and stuff, and to deal with scraped knees and to deal with all the different ways
Cartwheels, all of the cartwheels that are happening. Yeah.
Yes.
And
I love
soccer cleats, right? Yeah, you got to get those.
right.
Yeah.
I would say do it for yourself. If you're a parent, coaching is something you need. And I think oftentimes you need the mission more than the mission needs you. You need those kids more than those kids need you in a lot of ways, because they will mold you. And so they'll shatter your worldview. And professionally, if you're a manager, at a bank or at a business, kids are a whole nother level of management skills that you will take back to your professional world. But yeah, I would just encourage everyone out there to coach, volunteer, as much for the children, as much for them as for yourself and as you as a parent. Anyway, that's what I got to say on coaching.
I agree with that so much. And I've just been really, really fortunate to have had wonderful coaches within the experience that we've had all throughout, both rec as well as, the club and travel teams. My husband also coaches quite a bit, in the way that he entered into the coaching experience at that very age that you cite, if not even younger, at like 5 years old, coaching my first daughter's little soccer team, is because she was too timid to get onto the field. And the way that he got her out there was to say, I will be there with you. And the way that I will do so is by being your coach. And so there was an opportunity for him to step up through that lens. He stayed through all of the three. I think he's probably wrapping up his last year with our youngest as we speak, until she moves on from there. But he walks around town and they're like, hey, Coach Sean, right? Like the kids know him as that. So he initially was drawn into it through the parental experience, and we both come from leadership positions professionally, so we will rise to the occasion when there is a need for that. So I think that there was a natural inclination to do that, but I know he got so much out of it. And what I look for in others is what I have in him, and that is a very specialized skill set around communication. As a parent, ultimately, I look for two things. One matters a little bit more than the other as they get older, but firstly, communication. Am I informed? Do I have everything I need at my fingertips to feel successful? Do I ultimately have what it takes to execute on these commitments that we want to follow through? Am I stressed? Am I showing up at the wrong field at the right time, right? That's why we built Orgo, to help with all of that. But those are the primary questions to have at my fingertips. And it's a very basic need, is just to have information. And to the extent to which some of these coaches are doing that better than others, I know that that's a very big criteria for some of the parents as they think about what's the right team for me. How do I feel within it? Do I feel successful as a parent around it? That's point number one. Number two, as they get older, if any of my kids come home and they say, I didn't like the way that coach spoke to me, or I didn't like the way that they spoke to blah, blah, blah. And they'll talk to you, get older, especially girls. Oof, coach said X, Y, Z. And we're kind of tough. So we have a high threshold for what we would consider to be concerning. But that's something that I always keep an ear out for. How do you feel? Not so much what they say, but how do they make you feel? Because we love a tough coach. We understand that words are meant to inspire, motivate, etc. But if there's a connotation that a child or a human feels in a sixth sense kind of way, I take caution to that. Luckily, we've been very fortunate, but that's something that I'm always in the lookout for.
Yeah. And just to add to that, we need good coaches. And one thing about, if you're going to ask your kid to put themselves out there, to put themselves in places where they're, not comfortable, a lot of times sports is hard. A lot of times, every time sports is hard. You got to lead by example. And so, if you're going to throw your kids into the ringer, you need to be able to jump in there with them. And, being a coach for 9 years on track and field and gymnastics and cheerleading, that was my life for 20 years, all volunteer. And some of the best mentors in my life were my athletic coaches. Still to this day, the lessons I learned on the field are influencing me. And a lot of these were just volunteer dads. They were firemen. They were just engineers. They were just parents that cared and that took the time to just say, just raise your hand. I'll take the team this year. I'll be the assistant coach this year. I'll drive the bus this year. And so don't hold back on that. Push yourself to do that. Just as much you expect these kids to push themselves, you have to push yourself as a parent and as a coach, and you won't be you'll be better off for it. And your kids are going to learn from that example.
And there's a couple of ways to also doing that, right? So the coaching call out that I hear you say so loudly, and of course I can't support that enough. There's other opportunities within the teams that we've been on, especially rec, where parents were asked to participate and perform. Right. So on our track team, we've had parent relays at the end of every big championship meet. So I ran a little bit of track in high school. I'm showing up at that. That call, we're suiting up, we're at the starter block. Like, it just was so great. And the kids were cheering for us. And now, you're kind of like, I still got it a little bit, and so the kids kind of see you sweat. The same thing with swimming. There's always swim, relays and things. And the last example that I'll share is a bit of an anecdote. So I used to dance when I was younger. And I put my kids, all three of them danced until they were just like, I can't do this anymore. And the last one is still standing. But the skill set around stage presence and just understanding what it's like to have many eyes on you with the bright lights and all the pressure that comes with that. We value that very much. But there was a time where we had an opportunity for parents to also do a parent dance. So in a competition, and so I signed up for that, and I had to go to practice and rehearsal, every week. And then we had a real dance that we had to perform. So for them to see, us on stage or us performing in a way that, we do as adults is so important, because there's such a divide between them and us, right? Like, it's not this, it's like, I don't know, it's us versus them until, they're teenagers, and we're able to relate to them a lot easier, hopefully. But rise to the occasion, say yes, show up and volunteer. Those are definitely important messages to send.
Yeah, let me say a little bit on that. I did coach cross country for 6 years, and I am by no means the shape of a cross country runner. So, but every Friday, and we probably had about 7 or 8 dads and moms that coached with us, and we ran with them. But every Friday at practice, we would do a relay race, and we would spread the parents out among the teams. Yeah. And the kids loved it. And the parents are like pulling hamstrings and spraining ankles trying to win these races.
Because we show up. We won't stretch and we won't warm up, but we'll show up.
Right. But the kids loved it. And I think that's what they still talk about to this day, is us jumping in there with them and having fun. It's not all about, the win. A lot of it is just about being there with your kids. And I still have grown men coming up to me, turning into 5-year-olds right in front of me, calling me coach and running me down. Yeah. I love it.
The thing that I always say about sports specifically, again, because this is such an amazing experience that I now get to vicariously live alongside them. It's a shared experience. The shared component is often lost in that it's us versus them. It's they're doing this. We kind of bring them to places and do these other things. It's a shared experience. So what you've just described are moments in time where we are empathetic to one another. We're sharing in those experiences, and it's positive and it's joyful. Hopefully, it usually is. And so to the extent that we don't lose sight of that, we can facilitate more shared moments. That's whole, our just be like, hey, we're in it together.
It takes a village to raise a child if it's done right. In my opinion, the most adjusted, well-adjusted kids that I see that become adults and all that, they have a village, and a coach is such a huge part of this village. And you're right. If you're a parent out there and you don't know anything about the sport, it doesn't matter. You know what they want you to do? Show up, show unconditional love. Don't judge them. Do your best to teach them. And the good news is, whether you go to one of my clinics or you get on YouTube or figure something out, there's a way for you to learn enough to teach these kids fundamentals and just kind of create that safe, fun environment and focus on the effort and the joy of this journey. And you're right. This is just a great way to roll that out there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, none of us knew how to drive or walk when we started life, but we figured that out too. So coaching's no different. Parenting's no different. You got what it takes. You got to trust in yourself. That many times all it takes is just your yes. Once you say yes, everything else takes care of itself.
Right. Keep it in perspective.
And there's not a single parent that's gone through this experience that I've spoken with throughout this time that said that they regretted doing that. In fact, they look back on it retroactively and they miss it. They miss it for various reasons, right? Like all of a sudden there's a void, there's lack of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Need, purpose. Thank you. It's late in the day. It's been a long day in startup life. Purpose, but they miss it. there's one time that it was one gentleman said, I would give anything to just be back in the car with my son coming home from one of his games or going to one of the games. Like just that moment in time that any one of us can like vicariously put ourselves into. It stayed with me so much because it was just such joy, but also pain that he was reflecting on and reminiscing about. I was like, yeah, I get it.
I want to give a little, just because parents are going to go out there and do this, which I love. And we're creating that call to action, right? Craig was to go out there and do this. I just want to say, be careful of what you say when you're coaching, particularly your own child. It can and will be used against you, right? And the ride home, right? I'll tell you, the ride there is very simple. Keep it very simple. Don't try to overcoach them over. Yeah, I love you. Go have fun. Play hard and have fun. I love watching you play. On the way back, be careful, because what happens is you saw your child make an error, and you're replaying it, going, "Oh my gosh, this and that," and they're living that. So for me, what I would do with my kids is that we didn't talk about the game. I had 2 kids, right? So my son and my daughter. My son was older, so the game was over, and we're going to get in the car. Whoever just played got to choose if they sit in the front seat or the back seat, right? Where they want to sit. My son, if he didn't think he played well, he'd want to sit in the back seat and process it, and it helped me to know. Right. And my daughter always wanted to sit in the front seat because she was younger and she knew it pissed her brother off. So that was a part. I also let him choose the music. Right. So my daughter would put the radio on and we'd listen, and we didn't talk about it. We just kind of let it be what it was for the moment. Right. My son wanted country. We put it on. We did our thing. And the last one, which is really cool, is they got to choose where we were going to go have the snack or eat or get a Slurpee or whatever it was. And I remember this time with my daughter, we lost a game in Cloverdale, this tiny little city in the middle of nowhere. And we're on our way. She goes, where do you want to go? She said Applebee's. So we went to Applebee's, and which is great. I think she was 8 years old. And so we went into Applebee's. And by the time we sat down, she had the pink and white sugar packets out on the table, and she was showing what the kids were doing. And she's like, "Dad, we should have done this." I'm like, I got her, right? You know, so if we just let it be their journey, we don't have to ask questions. They'll bring it to us because they just played it. They just lived it. So be careful what you say as a parent coach out there, because it can really make a difference between those kids wanting to keep playing and feeling the unconditional love, or saying, you know what, I don't know about this.
Yeah. But even as a parent too, like my daughter last night, she came home and she asked, I saw that she was in a bad mood, and she was just kind of like taking it out on her sisters, which, you know, is kind of a regular Wednesday night around here. But she didn't have a great game. And I asked her, I was like, do you want space or do you want to talk about it? And she's like, I definitely need space. So she took the next couple of hours, you know, homework, shower, whatever, comes downstairs for a snack. How did it go? She's like, I'm just not really to like say much about it. I'm like, cool, no worries. This morning she comes downstairs anew, renewed, recycled, ready to go. We don't even have to talk about it. I'm sure I'll get the details. Maybe 5 days from now, she'll reflect. 7 days from now, she'll be able to cite something. And so the one thing that I do typically ask in those moments where clearly it's not a positive outcome or there's some self-reflection that's taking place, is just simply allocate and correlate what differently should you be doing next time, or ask the question, did you do enough scale-wise? Is there a practice component here? Is there like an opportunity to improve on that, or some action that you can take? Because letting that moment be passive, I think, is the slippery slope. Because if we're not correlating it for a specific age, not an 8-year-old, but certainly a 14-year-old, we can have those conversations. And just to kind of see if there's any reflection happening there. Like, should we be at the wall a little more now? Should we like be, you know, on the rebounder in the backyard? Like, what could we be doing there? She's like, yeah, I was like really good on the defensive side, and then defensively, you know, I just wasn't as strong. And I don't know, I was just feeling a bit off. And I'm like, okay, well, let's reflect on that. So there's always some feedback loop that I find myself having, but not in a critical way, in an actionable way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I see we're coming up on I can't believe it's been 57 minutes already. But here we are at the end of the show. Is there any message or call to action either of you would like to leave our Parks and Rec audience, parents, coaches with?
I want to toss it to Zoya. First of all, thanks for your time today and joining us, which has been great and good insight. But talk a little bit, if you could, about what you're doing, and the connection of the dot to there would be great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the things that we did not necessarily touch on, but I do think that all of us would agree is important, is time literacy as an important component to what sports can teach, you know, at a very young age, and understanding what executive skills relative to what it takes to show up on time and respecting schedules, and ultimately feeling like you are a part of the day and you can own that day, right? And take proactive steps as young as 6 and 7 years old to prepare yourself for leaving the house and packing up your own bag and, putting away the uniform, whatever it may be. So we built ultimately a mobile app called Orgo. You can find us at orgohq.com that helps parents, firstly, manage logistics of youth sports, whether it's rec or just everyday life or club travel, etc. You'll see all the ways that we do that differently. It's truly through a logistics point of view. It measures time through preparation and early arrivals and carpools and all the ways that we actually realistically spend our time in the real world. So that's what we built to help them with that. But then for kids, they are also users on the platform. So I see my 3 daughters, the way that they operate within, the ecosystem and how they receive our notifications to say, it's time to start preparing for swim. 7-year-old goes to the mudroom, packs her bag, stands at the door ready with her backpack, carpool's picking her up. She's ready to go, right? So those real world skills is what we're trying to impart on both the youth as well as, of course, the families themselves. So check us out, free still, at orgohq.com. Would love to see you in there.
Fantastic. That's such a great app. And how long have y'all been building this?
So I left corporate about 2 years ago, and I've been on this founder journey since. We've been in market for about a year, small team, growing organically, about to do so a little bit with a heftier fist, if you will, but very mission driven. We're going to be partnering with a ton of nonprofits, and we're going to be giving away portions of our profits to organizations that we feel could benefit from the full circle moment and feeding back into the, to the ecosystem of sports. So we've got some really great opportunities to give back as well.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a deep dive one day on that. We'll have to have you back on the show, or maybe we can even have you on my leadership series, because I think that's there's so many efficiencies and wisdom that we can, put together on an app like that, to where, because it's a lot of madness to orchestrate. And to have an organizational app that understands sports and managing everything that you do as a parent.
Yeah, I like to say that we live on a very high frequency, right? We lead a high frequency lifestyle that we all sign up for. We just want to do it better. Like, we sign up for the busyness, not the chaos. So to the extent that we can do that better, let us help.
Well, it's a good thing life seems to be slowing down for everybody, right?
Yeah. For me, Craig, first of all, I'm blown away with how much response since we just started talking about this and put it out there from Facebook connections. Thank you for those that are connecting. Let's keep it rolling. LinkedIn is going through the roof, which is wonderful, and following this stuff here. I'm excited through the National Cav Athletics. We're franchising, so we're rolling it out. So if you're out there in the space and you're looking to be able to dive in and you're looking for a way to partner with a group that can help you have this kind of impact significantly on the community, where you get excited to get up every morning and go to work, this is it, as we go forward. And I'm excited, looking forward to this journey, because I know that this, as we progress through this podcast and this journey we're going to be able to talk about everything youth sports, where we always get to talk, teach, and play. And I'm excited for the journey.
Yeah, well, thank y'all so much for helping just contribute to this network. Like I say to many people, we're kind of just like ESPN wasn't around, and I'm sure in some barroom they say, what if we had a network just for sports? And so we now have a network just for parks and recreation, and we've got a whole list of shows that are being born and now calling the Daily Parks and Rec show their home. And this is one of our earliest with Youth Sports Mastery. And so thank you so much, Aaron, for picking up that torch and running with it and being the co-host on this. And Zoya, man, I want to hear more about this app in the future, but thank you so much for being our first guest.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And Aaron, thanks for the ask.
You got it. We'll be in touch soon.
All right. You got it. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. Y'all take care. Bye. All right, Aaron. Man, that was a great show. Fantastic.
Are we still live?
Yeah. We're still live. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what our thoughts were around where we want to go with this show, and maybe kind of share with the audience, what do you want this youth sports mastery to be? What could it be for this industry?
Yeah. I've often thought, as someone that has spent my entire adult life in this space, that this is so needed, because we all talk about it. If you got a kid,
Mm.
whether they're playing sports or not, you're aware of youth sports. And unfortunately, I feel like there's so much negativity that is being pushed out there in the youth sports space because of all the problems with the officials and the coaches and parents and all this other stuff, that I'm not saying that this is going to be euphoric, but I think it can be a way where we can have conversations, we can deep dive in. Someone like Zoya, who's got such an interesting experience background, and then bring that forward and be able to connect the dots. And I've got so many people that my vision is working with you and then hosting this thing and rolling it out, that each week we're going to be able to bring up the topics from the NIL, what's going on with if my kid wants the opportunity to make money, get to play and all that, or the pressures or all these other factors. I feel like if we can really dig into those every week, and talk to people that are not just philosophically engaged in it, but are physically doing it, that live in this stuff, I think it's going to be a game changer. I really do. And, the good news is I get calls and emails all the time and Facebook messages all the time. This way I can hit that larger audience in one fell swoop instead of one by one. And I still will. If you send me an email, you message me, whatever, I'll reach out and connect. But this would be just a great way. And I love the way that you've designed it, because it just gives us enough space. That you think about it, and man, did that hour fly for you? Because it just went, right?
Oh my gosh. Well, you had such a great guest. I mean, Zoya, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And I think she has so many real world life lessons as a former athlete, as a parent, as a mother of three, pushing kids through this youth sports system, and then even building a company, dedicating her life to building a company that works in this industry as well. I mean, you just can't go wrong when you get somebody like that to just let you know what her experience was, because you got to know there's a lot of parents that are thinking just like her, that are experiencing the same thing. And just to have a platform where they can have a voice and listen to how other parents are handling it. And then even how you can dedicate your life to this industry, and not just through a volunteer, but they can work with someone like you and make this their career. Can even build a company like Zoya is doing. There's so many opportunities here. You don't necessarily have to keep in corporate. Nothing against corporate. I have built lots of businesses in my life, but coming into Parks and Rec, and especially youth sports, man, what a purpose-driven life if you can find a way to hang your hat in your career here.
We're awarding franchises right now. We're getting so many requests. It's really been a fun journey to see the people that are coming in, because it's not just your traditional business person, and it's not just your traditional athlete that wants. We're getting from all different spectrum. People are going to our website and they're just digging in, getting the playbook, and they're like, man, I can do this and I want to do this. And it's so great, because when we get the people that are coming through that want to change their life, purpose and profit and passion, and put the whole thing together, even words that don't begin with a P, right? They get to have this amazing journey. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, man, this is a great first episode. This is, God, I feel like this is our 10th episode. We had such great preparation. I guess it's when you just have really good people that have a depth of experience. It's just, you almost just set the stage and hand them the mic and the magic just happens. And I really think that's what just happened. So great job on our first episode. And so if you'd like to see this again, we're going to do this every Thursday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to talk about everything youth sports. When we say mastery, who are the masters of youth sports? And just to quickly cover some of the buckets of people that we're targeting, obviously coaches, athletes that have risen all the way to the pro level, parents like we just had. And then also, if you're in Rex, am I missing out in the other categories? Athletic directors, stuff like that.
People that are Parks and Rec directors or coordinators that are coordinating recreational sports in their communities. How do you deal with like facility usage and joint use agreements with schools? And how do you bring these to the community?
The future of parks and recreation is here, and it starts with you. Welcome back to the Daily Parks and Recreation Show, where we bring you the latest insights, trends, and conversations shaping the world of parks and recreation. Today, we're diving into something that's shaping the future of our industry, Young Professional Networks, or YPN. If you love your job and love the parks and recreation community and are looking to connect with the next generation of leaders, this episode is for you. YPN is where driven, passionate professionals come together to connect, grow, and make a real impact. It's not just about networking, it's about building the future of our communities. Why join YPN? Career growth and mentorship. Learn from the best in the industry. Innovative ideas and collaboration. Be part of the next big movement. Leadership development. Take charge, make decisions, and create change. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your career to the next level, YPN is your gateway to success. From exclusive networking opportunities to cutting-edge industry insights, this is where you build your legacy. Because the future of parks and recreation starts with you.